September 2020. I remember doing my homework while watching Sony's State of Play. I wasn't very hyped for much besides Spider-Man Miles Morales, but then this logo appeared, and boy was I in for a ride. Final Fantasy XVI had just been announced and revealed right in front of me, and I witnessed it. Fast forward to November 2023, my mom had bought me a PS5 that came with Spider-Man 2, but I bought and chose to play Final Fantasy XVI first, the game that I had been wanting to play. And for the first couple of days, I loved it. I loved the prologue. I loved the first 15 hours. But then, something started to creep in. You see, halfway through I started to get really bored. The game was bloated with mindless talking to NPCs, cutscenes that seemed to take forever to finish, and it just kept repeating itself for so long, and eventually I got bored. I kept deleting the game every time I downloaded it. I didn't want to spend 30 minutes talking to NPCs just walking back and forth with nothing happening. I couldn't bring myself to truly appreciate it. But then one day, I decided to re-download it. Not to continue, but to replay through the GreatWood area of the game. And boy, it made me feel something. In that moment during playing the game for the first time in a while. That was my moment when I realized I fell in love with the game again. So I decided to get through the slow parts of the game and finish it. And I adore the game. But don't get me wrong, I still criticize the game, and I'll get to those parts later, but just like any other review, I'm going to talk about things that I like and things that I don't like. Enjoy. Final Fantasy XVI's opening was able to capture the essence and theme of the game, gripping you with its prelude theme sounding very ominous but enough to get you hyped that a new Final Fantasy game is now in our hands.
Crystals. And that it was this light which finally led our forebears out of the darkness. Yet, what they saw in the light gave rise to temptation. Temptation that ever lures us back into the crystal shadow. And thus did our journey begin.
We then transition into this epic duel between the Phoenix and Ifrit, already giving us a glimpse of what this game is all about. I don't really want to talk about that part, but I'll get onto that part later. I want to focus on the actual prologue itself. We find ourselves in a very much more lively Valistia, more specifically the Grand Duchy of Rosaria, where we're introduced to the main cast. Clive Rossfield, Joshua Rossfield, hey, that's my name, and Jill Warwick. Sorry, bad joke, but I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil this past month. The tone in the prologue is very different compared to the whole game. It's very medieval and very Game of Thrones inspired, even though that can be said for the whole game. A fun fact, Final Fantasy XVI takes a lot of inspiration from Game of Thrones. Just had to say that, because, well, what are the chances some of you guys are watching like Game of Thrones? Clive Rossfield is the main character and older brother to Joshua Rossfield. Joshua Rossfield is the dominant of fire, meaning he holds the powers of the Phoenix, and Clive, although the firstborn to the Rossfield family, did not inherit the power of the Phoenix. Even the father, Elwyn, does not inherit them. So Clive becomes Joshua's sworn shield. Annabella Rossfield is the mother of Clive and Joshua and husband to Elwyn, and she absolutely detests Clive. She sees Clive as a failure since he never received the powers of the Phoenix, and it's very apparent.
Good day to you, Mother.
What a way to treat your own flesh and blood.
Visually, looking at Rosaria is stunning. This game is absolutely gorgeous. Man, it's crazy to think that this is what Final Fantasy looks like now. Anyways, going back to the story, Annabella betrays her family and sells them out to the Sambreki Holy Empire. Gosh, I need to learn how to say that. Elwyn tries to flee with Joshua, but Elwyn gets killed by his own men who are traitors, and with Joshua seeing this and traumatized, leads to him unlocking the true powers of the Phoenix. Unknowing to him, Clive then transforms into Ifrit to fight Joshua, and without Clive knowing, he kills Joshua and all of the people in Rosaria. The prologue is definitely one of the best parts of the entire game. It's just amazing. I mean, the music, the combat, the action, the cinematic, like everything about it is just great, and I don't know how to describe it. It's just phenomenal. Moving on from the prologue, I want to talk about the themes and how they're presented throughout the game. There are many themes in Final Fantasy XVI that tackle a lot of topics like freedom, slavery, political class, and having free will. But I want to focus on the topics freedom and slavery. In the world of Valistia, most civilians are bound to be bearers. Essentially, what this means is that being a slave to someone and having no freedom to do anything whatsoever. Throughout the world of Final Fantasy XVI, we can clearly see how these people live. They're always working, never a day off, and constantly pushing themselves to the limits, using magic to clearly do things that take a toll on them, which unfortunately makes them bedridden with the blight, or worse, having their body turned to stone. Bearers are treated and seen as tools, pets, not people, expected to serve until their bodies give out. The act of casting magic, instead of empowering them, slowly drains their life away. Throughout the game, when you explore certain areas, you can clearly see how people treat bearers. Here's an example.
That's enough dallying, you two.
Go on, back to the pens with you. I need you fit for the morrow's harvest.
Society doesn't see that cost, only the convenience of what they can do for them. And so, this brings me back to the topic of freedom. Cid and Clive both fight for a world where people can die on their own terms. That's Cid's ideology, that everyone should at least be allowed to die on their own terms, with dignity, rather than being worked to death for someone else's gain. Clive, however, fights for a vision. Even further, he believes in a world where people should be able to live on their own terms, not just freedom in death, but freedom in life. But with magic in the way of that, people who don't even have 2 pennies to rub together will always be seen and looked down upon as bearers. Nothing more than no good workers for the higher class. They're born into a system that sees them as less than human, and the brand they carry marks them for life. The combat in Final Fantasy XVI is flashy, fast, action-oriented, and a little boring. I still think the only Final Fantasy game to get action-based combat right is the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, but that's not to say the combat in 16 is bad. Without the icon abilities, Clive feels pretty weak, all things considered. When you attack, it's pretty slow, and there's no real dodge mechanic if you want to include the evading. And overall, I found the combat to be really easy. Like, I was level 42, and while not that high, I beat the game easily. You can use icon abilities as you gain them through fighting dominance, which makes combat more fun. Going back to feeling weak, I bought new weapons and upgraded them, and I still didn't feel any satisfaction. It was only when I was playing on Final Fantasy mode when combat was way harder. And by the way, you can only unlock hard mode when you beat the game, so some of the best parts of the game is only at the end of the game, which, I don't know, I feel like they should have added that. Regardless, they shouldn't have made it something that you have to, beat the game to get. But that's just what I think. On hard mode, I actually had to think of what I was going to do instead of just button mashing. Not saying the combat is the worst thing I've ever played, I just wish there was more weapon variety. It would have made the combat way more fun. But you might say, oh, but Clive only uses swords. Okay, well, it could have been cool to at least wield like 2. But regardless, the combat is definitely more fluid rather than Final Fantasy XV, where the combat felt really buggy. Pressing square allows Clive to attack with his sword, and holding R2 and circle allows Clive to warp if you're using the powers of Ifrit, but you can also do way more with certain commands. Triangle allows you to cast magic, and pressing X allows you to jump. There are many other abilities that you can do, but I won't cover all of them because I'll be here for maybe like another 2 minutes, and I don't want that. But overall, I found the combat really cool and, flashy and fine, but it was just really, really easy. But hey, maybe I'm just good at games. No, not funny? Okay. To me, the true highlight of Final Fantasy XVI is the boss fights. They are amazing. It's a mix of cinematic gameplay, QTEs, and don't even get me started on the music. The soundtrack in this game is definitely top 5 in the franchise. My personal favorite boss fights are the Titan fight and the Ultima fight. Everything about these fights are amazing. The scale of the boss fights are insane. One moment you're fighting as regular guys on the ground, then all of a sudden the music picks up and boom, you're fighting a giant icon. I don't have much to say because I just think the bosses are the pinnacle of Final Fantasy XVI, and some of the best moments in the entire game are the boss fights, and honestly, they're just so epic. I mean, some of them you have to, button mash to try to evade something, or, it's just crazy. Like, I couldn't really put it into words because it's phenomenal. It's gorgeous. It's great to look at, and I think if you want to give Final Fantasy XVI a try, just keep your hopes up for the boss fights. The world of Final Fantasy XVI is breathtaking. This game, alongside 13, 15, and the remake trilogy, are some of the best looking Final Fantasy games. The areas and the open world is just visually stunning, but unfortunately, there's not a lot to do in certain areas of the game. A lot of the quests are just fetch quests. The world is very barren with not much to do. All there is to do is just fight monsters or look around. One big problem I have with this game is that certain cities are restricted to go into. We can look at them but can't go in them, and yes, I know you can go into them during certain parts of the story, but that's just story. In fact, there's not a lot to do after the story of Final Fantasy XVI besides, like, fighting and quests, but I don't really like the quests in this game. And yes, I know there's DLC, but outside of DLC, there's nothing to do whatsoever. It's such a bummer because when we get to see those places, they look incredible. With 16 obviously wanting to be better than 15, although not explicitly said, but when you make a sequel, you want it to be better than the predecessor. It should have been allowed for us to go into certain kingdoms, for example, the kingdom of Sanbreque. It looks amazing. And I know we're able to go there when fighting Dion, but come on, that was barely anything. It was nighttime, the city was ruined. I want to be able to explore the city in daytime and not in ruins. I just wish there was more stuff to do in the open world. Obviously, I'm not talking about the outposts, as there are much more to do in the places like the Hideaway and Martha's Rest. But outside of those places, there's pretty much nothing to do, but the plus for me is that the game is very pretty, very much pretty. So walking around is still very fun and a joy, really. Overall, don't expect much from the world. There's not much to do at all. In fact, there's not a lot to do. If you want a good game that actually has a good open world, play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Rebirth learned a lot from 16, which is why I love the open world in Rebirth. It is fun, it's engaging, it's interactive, and Rebirth's open world just healed me entirely. But hey, I'm not saying the open world is bad, or however you want to call it, open world, open whatever. The game is stunning. Look at this. It's beautiful. It's fucking beautiful, man. But I wish there was more stuff to do. Okay, this is where I come down to my main complaint and a huge major issue I have with this game. The pacing in Final Fantasy XVI is awful. In order to tell a good story, you need to have good pacing, and Final Fantasy XVI does not have that. The main story is hard to get through sometimes. The game wants to tell a story that is incredible, but you're instantly thrown off with mindless talking. Some short cutscenes, even though they're supposed to be short, take 10 to 20 minutes, and when the cutscenes end, you walk to another NPC and talk to them for about another 10 minutes, and you're barely playing the game. And it's also hard to really give two shits about what's happening when I can just skip the cutscenes by pressing circle. I mean, come on, it's really bad game design. Some cutscenes take to like an hour. You're not playing for like a good 30 minutes. You're just watching cutscenes, and while it's gorgeous, it's a video game, not a movie. Sometimes I think Final Fantasy XVI would have done better if it was a movie. Remove Final Fantasy XVI and call it, I don't know, The Tales of Valistia. Make it a movie. It would be a hit. And it repeats itself through the story. For example, after fighting Bahamut and reuniting with Joshua, it's some of the best moments of the game. It's emotional, it's impacting, it's everlasting, it's great. The lead up to the fight, having the Phoenix and Ifrit fuse together to fight Bahamut, seeing Clive and Joshua reunite with each other is emotional, it's amazing. With things happening like that so fast, you're eager to see what happens next. But no, you're thrown out to certain areas to talk to NPCs for about 45 minutes or an hour. It's absolutely terrible and it sucks. This game really suffers from this. And I noticed after Cid dies, the pacing gets progressively worse through each act of the game. There's a big time skip which doesn't help at all. The pacing does get better eventually when you're facing Ultima and during the end part of the game. Regardless, I should not be having to talk to NPCs for 30 plus minutes and having the game expect me to be invested when there's just nothing to be excited for. The truth is, people don't have 40 hours or 10 hours or even 2 hours a day to play games that much. So I think reducing making the pacing somewhat decent can really make people want to play the game again. Because when I finished it, I felt this moment of like relief and satisfaction that the game was over. And when I finished it, I really liked the game, but I couldn't ignore the fact that the pacing, man, just sucks. The characters in Final Fantasy XVI are strong and rooted in so much depth and an emotion. There are so many great characters in the game, but I only want to talk about our main protagonist, Clive Rossfield. To me, Clive Rossfield is the perfect embodiment of what it means to be strong. He's this character that, at first, is filled with hatred, seeking revenge to find the person who killed his brother.
I killed Joshua! I killed them all! I'm a monster! And I deserve to die! So end it! End it now! Please! Please!
And naturally, Clive hates himself for this. He thinks he's worthless and should be dead, but through the people he meets like Sid and Gav, they help him understand himself and steer him into making the right decisions. He becomes a beacon of hope and change that maybe, just maybe, Valistia can change. He is the hero that goes from a character that has no meaning in their lives, wanting to seek vengeance and just that, to a character that aspires to the lives of many and eventually takes the mantle of Sid later on. As Sid dies, Clive feels the responsibility that he owes up to Sid's ideology of making a world that's free of bearers. With the story moving towards a different goal, in the second half, you can see a significant change in Clive's personality. Before, he's a brute, serious, and almost hatred-filled character, but his attitude shifts into a more lively person.
I think we're gonna need a bigger sword.
Mine's bigger.
Thank you, Clive, but I meant that figuratively.
You can see how he acts towards others. He shows more empathy and even jokes around sometimes. Clive is one of my favorite characters in this entire game. His design, his personality, everything about Clive is amazing. But I don't want to discredit other characters like Dion, Joshua, Jill, Sid, Gav. I think the entire cast is amazing. Like, there's not a bad written character, and that's one thing that Final Fantasy XVI is really good at. And I think with most recent Final Fantasy games, I think that's one thing that they've been getting like really good. The cast, the characters. And that's it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I had a lot of fun making this video. Some of you guys may not agree with what I think, that I don't like everything. Maybe you just don't, that didn't make sense. Maybe you just don't agree with what I said, some things I said. But everything I make is in my opinion, in case you didn't see that clearly. Resident Evil 4 video. But enough said, I'm working on another Final Fantasy related video, obviously, so stay tuned for that. I hope I can finish it soon. I put that video on hold since it's not scripted, and I really wanted to get this video out. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe, like the video, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the game. And yeah, stay tuned, guys. Peace out. Drop out. Was that funny? No? Okay, never mind. Bye-bye.